Again, this is our official welcome, and we're going to begin with prayer. So, if we can get in the mode of prayer at this time, we will begin. Father in heaven, we want to thank you once again for this blessed Sabbath day that you've given us. We want to thank you, Lord, for the opportunity to speak to your people today. Lord, I pray that you will inspire those who will be speaking, the presenters, the panelists, who will present the information at hand. And I pray that all those who are listening will be edified, educated, and blessed by what they hear today. Please bless every listener, Lord, and all those who are on their way. Lord, we thank you for your goodness and mercies towards us. Continue to be with us and every one of the families represented this evening. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Okay, I want to thank you all again for coming to one of our second sub topics of 2021. And of course, we'll be discussing the COVID-19 vaccine. Very interested topic. I'm sure we'll probably max out at over 100 participants. We're at 87 now. And as you're coming in again, I welcome you all, especially those who are coming in for the first time. So at this time, I am going to introduce the moderator of today's program, and that is none other than Dr. Alicia Shelley. Dr. Shelley is now our Hope Missions 360 Medical Director. She so kindly accepted the position after I think it's a couple of months ago, and we have enjoyed having her so far. Dr. Shelley comes to us well knowledgeable in the field of medicine. She has a number of certifications uh, from a number of different universities, including Oakwood University, St. Mary's Medical Center, American College of Physicians, just to name a few. Dr. Shelley is also certified by the American Board of Obesity Medicine, also by the Medical Board of Internal Medicine. Dr. Shelley currently works as an internal medicine outpatient physician with the WellStar Medical Group. She's also working on part-time basis with several other contractors, including the internal medicine outpatient physician at the Advanced Internal Medicine in Stockbridge, Georgia. Um, and that's just to name a few of her accolades. So we welcome you, Dr. Shelley. And at this time, I will turn the mic, or the virtual mic, over to you. All right, you can join us. And again, we're going to ask that you all mute your phones as much as you can. We will be watching. You also have the chat where you can ask your questions, because we will entertain the questions after the speakers present their information. Okay, go ahead, Dr. Shelley.
All right. Well, welcome everyone to our health seminar about COVID-19. Like you said, I am Dr. Alicia Shelley. I am a general internist. I do a general practice and actually now at WellStar in Douglasville. And then also I do obesity medicine as well. And so it's, as we all know, that COVID has affected all of our lives in this past year. Currently worldwide, 100 million people have contracted the virus. And then out of those million, at least 2 million have died worldwide. In the United States, we've had over 400,000 people who have died from the COVID virus. And so we thought it timely to be able to talk a little bit about ways of prevention. Now, I do have to apologize because right now I'm not able to bring up my slides. So what I will do is that I will show the video that I wanted towards the end after our discussion. So we're just going to move right along and talk. We have two experts here that are experts in the field of the COVID vaccine who are able to explain more to us. So we have two presenters. Our first presenter is going to be Dr. Mati Latsuayo Davis. Dr. Davis, was actually one of my close friends from Case Western Reserve. She actually graduated from the Cleveland Clinic Lerner School of College and also received her Master's of Public Health at the Case Western Reserve University. And she is currently at the Washington University School of Medicine in her working as a infectious disease physician. She also has a fellowship in HIV fellowship, also in sexually transmitted disease. On top of that, she has been a contributor to MSNBC, BBC, talking about COVID. So she is an expert in this area. So we're so happy that she's here today to give us her knowledge and her understanding of the virus. Our next participant is Dr. Joseph Rutley. He is a pharmacist here in Georgia, Fayetteville, Georgia. Also, he graduated from The Ohio State University in pharmacy. He's been a pharmacist for approximately 15 years and currently is the co-founder of Redley Health. So we're so excited to have both of these presenters. I'm going to start with Dr. Latsuayo Davis first, and then Dr. Redley will start afterward. And then if you can please leave all questions towards the end, we're going to ask that you put your questions in the chat and we'll be able to answer them. And please make sure you're muted because we don't want any further background noise. Thank you so much. Dr. Davis, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shelley. I can't tell you how pleased I was to hear from my close friend, Dr. Shelley, who was one of the main supports that I had throughout medical school. I think we saw each other through quite a lot during that time. And to see her thrive and lead in the way that she is not a surprise to me, but it is just wonderful to see. So thank you so much for having me here in this space. I was asked to give about 10 minutes by the way of an introduction into COVID-19 and the vaccine. And so I will do so, but knowing that, the bulk of the learning and the discussion is in the questions, because I think people have their own individual experiences and concerns. So I found myself a pregnant Black female immigrant infectious diseases physician at the beginning of this pandemic here in the United States. It was a very unique way to experience it because I found myself in the forefront of dealing with the pandemic as a physician, infectious diseases physician at a leading academic institution. But it was also very personal for me because I was pregnant and the health of my unborn child was foremost in my mind. And so I think throughout my experience, that has always been the two positions that I've tried to take. One of being an expert and someone who can impart knowledge and take care of people living who are dealing with COVID and its impact, but also as someone who is someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, and so has my own very real and personal concerns. So here in the US, we have seen COVID have a significant impact on our society. The United States is the leading country worldwide in both cases and deaths, which is concerning when you think about the level of resources available to this country. And it speaks to both a failure in leadership and also a really difficult public health response in a country that is so large and for whom Dr. Fauci spoke about, he has never seen, even back with HIV, he has never seen this level of polarization due to the political situation in this country. On top of that, because of the way that the states, there's individual jurisdictions according to state and then local government, for those of us in the public health sector, we've seen it be very challenging. My area of concern has always been with marginalized population and the impact in Black and Brown communities. Additionally, as many of you know, there has been a disproportionate impact in Black and Brown communities where Black, Latinx, and Native American populations are significantly more at risk, anywhere from 2 to 5 times more likely to get coronavirus and to be hospitalized due to it, and unfortunately to die from it. And this is not new. One of my areas of frustration early on in this pandemic was sort of the righteous indignation around Black and Brown bodies being sick and dying from this, because we have seen this time and time again with other conditions, whether it be heart disease, diabetes, cancer, obstetrical disease. COVID-19 joins a long list. And it is because of the systemic and institutional racism that dates back to slavery that we have seen time and time again with Henrietta Lacks, with the Tuskegee experiments, and the list goes on to our current time. And it speaks to the difference in access, the ability to access the best quality of health for Black and Brown communities due to many factors, whether it be differences in ability to have safe spaces to live, transport to get to these places, resources such as telephone and internet for telemedicine during this pandemic, food security, and many, many others. I also talk a lot about the history of mistrust, which I just touched upon in Black and Brown communities, that then makes it difficult for those populations to trust that the care that they will get is equitable and that the vaccine that is being provided is safe and effective. And what I tell people is you need to own that. You need to understand that that comes from a real and valid place based on the atrocities that are well documented in our community that have happened at the hands of scientists and government officials. To this end, I have then spent a lot of time being involved as a trusted messenger, as a person from one of these communities, to bringing accuracy around what is happening with the vaccine. So the first thing that I hear about very commonly is, I don't trust this vaccine because, quite frankly, it was made too fast. How can you make something so fast when it usually takes so much longer to develop this vaccine? And it is here I start by reminding people that SARS-CoV-2, which is the specific virus that causes the disease, is part of a bigger family called coronavirus. We in the medical community and scientific community have known about coronaviruses for decades. We've had scientists who work in labs exclusively on those coronaviruses. We have even tests available prior to this pandemic that test for other coronaviruses. So we know a lot about that family prior to this pandemic. It was the SARS-CoV-2 specific variant that was what was new and that needed to be worked on. But because we knew so much about that family, it wasn't a stretch to be able to get there. Similarly, the mRNA technology that is being used for this vaccine is one that has been in development for years prior to this pandemic. In fact, a Black woman, Dr. Kazmika Corbett, is one of the 2 leaders of creating this technology at the NIH. She is phenomenal, and I've had the honor to sit beside her at a panel. And she has dedicated her time to not just to the bench research that she does, but to educating folks and and speaking to some of these misconceptions. And the last reason why this wasn't a rushed process is because you have to understand that never in the history of the world have the entire world shut down to focus on this one project, which is the development of a vaccine. There are over 200 active vaccine trials worldwide. The Pfizer and the Moderna are only two of many that are in development. You've heard of AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson has come to the table. And every government stopped what they were doing to make resources and funding available for this development, as did pharmaceutical companies and research entities. So those are the three reasons why I believe this was not as rushed of a process as people think it was. The second thing I needed to see to be comfortable with this was how the information that was provided was dealt with. So who actually was responsible for saying this is a safe and effective vaccine? And so this went through multiple processes and protocols, phase 3 clinical trials. But at the end of those, there are external review boards, people who are not involved in Pfizer, Moderna, or the pharmaceutical companies, people who are not involved with the research entities, but who constitute a wide variety of backgrounds, whether it's scientific, medical, pharmaceutical, or just from the general public, that were given the data once they were done with this with those phase 3 clinical trials to make sure that it was indeed robust. I sit on the board of directors for the Infectious Diseases of Society of America's minority interest group. So all of the infectious diseases of color, I sit on the board for. And I know personally multiple people who are involved in the leadership of the Pfizer trials of color, multiple people in the Moderna, multiple people who are on the external review boards. We did not see enough recruitment of Black and brown people in these vaccines because we have never, ever in the United States been able to accomplish the kind of numbers in vaccine trials because Black and brown people don't trust researchers. They don't want to sign up for clinical trials. And can we blame them based on that history? But unlike before, because of the positive pressure, so many of us placed upon these companies, they actually even slowed down recruitment. They were going to close recruitment, and then they saw we don't have enough representation in Black and brown communities, and they slowed it down to make sure that more people were enrolled in those trials. So I will stop here. Some of the questions that I think will be important for us to address in the question and answer are people's concern about people with immunocompromised conditions, people with diabetes, people with cancers, people with autoimmune diseases, people who are pregnant or breastfeeding. Is this safe for them to take? Other questions that I get a lot of is side effects, short-term and long-term. Other concerns I get are around allergies and allergic reactions. So we will also address those in the Q&A portion. I just wanted to be respectful of the time of the agenda and our second esteemed speaker.
Right. Thank you so very much, Dr. Leswile Davis. We're going to actually have Dr. Redley. If you can go ahead and start your presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Shelley. Happy to be able to share in this program. Thank you so much for having me, our President, Mrs. Grace. And I just want to mention that I am a graduate from, as Dr. Shelley mentioned, from The Ohio State University, but I lived in Cleveland, Ohio. And I did do a little work at Case Western Reserve, Dr. Davis. So just a minute.
Cleveland is very well represented here today, I must say. And it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance, sir.
Thank you. I would like to share some slides, which I have. I'm not sure. Dr. Shelley, if you
go ahead and share your screen now.
Give me that opportunity. Let me see. Share. sharing. As Dr. Davis spoke, I notice I have some of the points on my slides, that slide that she mentioned. And I too have been concerned about some of the myths and of the vaccine, about the vaccine that we have been hearing. And so I've decided to talk about myths and facts as it relates to the vaccine, how we can differentiate between what are facts and what's myth. Still trying to share, so there.
For sharing, we did see your screen for a second. Can you try to share your screen one more time? We did see it for one moment and then it went away.
Yes, okay, there's a quest. Okay, there we go. I think I get it now. All right, are you able to see that now?
Yes, we can see your screen. If you want to put it in a slide.
All right, that's what I'm trying to get it. Oh, there we go.
Right.
So, facts, fiction. And like most of us as medical profession, when we hear the myths and the fiction, and we really what's going on, what is truth, and because of social media, there's so much information, and probably I should say misinformation, that is going out. So this forum to share and to dispel some of those concerns, I think, is very important. So I wanted to look at the effect of the COVID-19 vaccine on the DNA. You've heard that. And Dr. Davis did mention the concern about rush to judgment. And also, I'd like to look at the composition of the vaccine. What really makes up the vaccine? When you get the shot, what really is going into your arm, into your body? The coronavirus, as she had mentioned, there have been studies on a number of our family of coronavirus. So this SARS-CoV-2 is really, really not so new. And even the common cold, 4 virus in the corona family is responsible for that. And we know that every year there are different strains and variants, and so the flu vaccine has to be changed in an effort to keep up with some of these changes. So what really is the vaccine? It's a single strand mRNA, and the vaccine consists of, what the scientists did was to take a segment of that, the particular segment that codes for the spike protein, which envelopes the virus. And that spike protein, we know, is what helps the virus to penetrate the cells. And so once the body is able to mimic that, then the body produces antibodies, which serves to neutralize the effects if and when you actually do get the real infection. The important point here is that the mRNA is restricted to the cytoplasm, and so it does not move into the nucleus to affect or to change your DNA. So that's very, very important, that it produces the antibodies within the cytoplasm. It doesn't get into the DNA, into the nucleus where your DNA resides. And Dr. Davis mentioned a series of clinical trials and elaborate tests that usually have to be done before a vaccine comes to market, or any drug for that matter. And so we saw where the animal studies have been done, safety and efficacy studies have been done, and the more recent studies are the phase 3 clinical trials, which usually are done to determine in the case of a drug, is this new drug better than other drugs on the market? In this case, is the vaccine better than not having the vaccine? And that's how the two studies that we have heard about, the Pfizer study and the Moderna studies, were designed. In the case of the Moderna study, there were 38,000 individuals, volunteers, who were studied randomly, one group, 50% receiving vaccine and 50% no vaccine, and called a placebo. And the results show that there were some 94 to 95% efficacy rate, meaning that's how effective they found that the vaccine could be from a scientific standpoint. Also, checks and balances that are in here, at least in the United States of America. These were basically followed. One of the things that really caused it to appear as if the vaccine came to market quicker was the fact that there was some emergency use or emergency authorization of the use of the vaccine while the phase 3 trial were still going on. And typically we would complete the phase 3 trials and then go to production. So productions were actually started prior to the actual completion of some of these phase 3 trial studies. And finally, I just want to mention another concern that people have: what is in the vaccine? I get a shot, and there's so much information in social media, there's a possibility of some of the things you might be getting if you get the shot. And so we just want to mention and just briefly that when you look at the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine, what you really have is the piece of the mRNA which codes for the spike protein, the actual mRNA which would cause your body to produce the antibodies to fight against the disease. So, and then beside that, we were the other non-active things like lipids and salts and sucrose. The Pfizer vaccine, is important to note, no preservative. And therefore, and that's one of the reasons why, to maintain its integrity, it's really required to be at very low temperatures. You've heard this, you've seen this before, a temperature of negative 70 degrees Celsius required in what's called thermal shippers. And it would, for about 6 months at this ultra low temperatures and freezers, or 15 days in thermal shippers. The Moderna vaccine, finally, also the same mRNA technology, and therefore we have the modified mRNA as the active ingredient, coating for the same spike protein, and also inactive ingredients such as lipids. There are some acid stabilizers, and therefore the Moderna vaccines is able to maintain its integrity at a not so low temperature as the Pfizer vaccine. And so you could kept it for 6 months, standard freezer, or 30 days in the regular refrigerator. So these are some of the items I want to yield back to our chair as we move into entertaining some of the questions. I thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Rettley. So like I had mentioned before, I do apologize. I meant to show this before we got started, but I do want to share my screen as well so that I can show, so we can all be on the same page exactly how the COVID virus works and kind of go from there to have like just a baseline. So just give me one moment here while I can play this video. It's just a 6-minute video, but we should be able to see it. Okay, oh, wait a minute. Excuse me for 1 second. Let me make sure you can hear my sound. Okay.
Dr. Shelley, we heard it just now.
Oh, you did hear the sound? Oh, okay, okay. All righty then. All right, just give me one moment here.
This is SARS-CoV-2. It belongs to the family of coronaviruses named for the crown-like spikes on their surface. SARS-CoV-2 can cause COVID-19, a contagious viral infection that attacks primarily your throat and lungs. What actually happens in your body when you contract the coronavirus? What exactly causes your body to develop pneumonia? And how would a vaccine work? The coronavirus must infect living cells in order to reproduce. Let's have a closer look. Inside the virus, genetic material contains the information to make more copies of itself. A protein shell provides a hard protective enclosure for the genetic material as the virus travels between the people it infects. An outer envelope allows the virus to infect cells by merging with the cell's outer membrane. Projecting from the envelope are spikes of protein molecules. Both a typical influenza virus and the new coronavirus use their spikes like a key to get inside a cell in your body, where it takes over the cell's internal machinery, repurposing it to build the components of new viruses. When an infected person talks, coughs, or sneezes, droplets carrying the virus may land in your mouth or nose and then move into your lungs. Once inside your body, the virus comes in contact with cells in your throat, nose, or lungs. One spike on the virus inserts into a receptor molecule on your healthy cell membrane like a key in a lock. This action allows the virus to get inside your cell. A typical flu virus would travel inside a sac made from your cell membrane to your cell's nucleus that houses all its genetic material. The coronavirus, on the other hand, doesn't need to enter the host cell nucleus. It can directly access parts of the host cell called ribosomes. Ribosomes use genetic information from the virus to make viral proteins, such as the spikes on the virus's surface. A packaging structure in your cell then carries the spikes in vesicles which merge with your cell's outer layer, the cell membrane. All the parts needed to create a new virus gather just beneath your cell's membrane. Then, a new virus begins to bud off from the cell's membrane. Now, with the virus spreading in your body, how can you develop pneumonia symptoms? For this, we'll have to look into your lungs. Each lung has separate sections called lobes. Normally, as you breathe, air moves freely through your trachea or windpipe, then through large tubes called bronchi, through smaller tubes called bronchioles, and finally into tiny sacs called alveoli. Your airways and alveoli are flexible and springy. When you breathe in, each air sac inflates like a small balloon. And when you exhale, the sacs deflate. Small blood vessels called capillaries surround your alveoli. Oxygen from the air you breathe passes into your capillaries, and then carbon dioxide from your body passes out of your capillaries into your alveoli so that your lungs can get rid of it when you exhale. Your airways catch most germs in the mucus that lines your trachea, bronchi, and bronchioles. In a healthy body, hair-like cilia lining the tubes constantly push the mucus and germs out of your airways, where you might expel them by coughing. Normally, cells of your immune system attack viruses and germs that make it past your mucus and cilia and enter your alveoli. However, if your immune system is weakened, like in the case of a coronavirus infection, the virus can overwhelm your immune cells and your bronchioles and alveoli become inflamed as your immune system attacks the multiplying viruses. The inflammation can cause your alveoli to fill with fluid, making it difficult for your body to get the oxygen it needs. You could develop lobar pneumonia, where one lobe of your lungs is affected, or you could have bronchopneumonia that affects many areas of both lungs. Pneumonia may cause difficulty breathing, chest pain, coughing, fever and chills, confusion, headache, muscle pain, and fatigue. It can also lead to more serious complications. Respiratory failure occurs when your breathing becomes so difficult that you need a machine called a ventilator to help you breathe. These are the machines that save lives and that medical device companies currently ramp up production for. Whether you would develop these symptoms depends on a lot of factors, such as your age and whether you already have an existing condition. While this all sounds scary, the push to develop a coronavirus vaccine is moving at high speed. Studies of other coronaviruses led most researchers to assume that people who have recovered from a SARS-CoV-2 infection could be protected from reinfection for a period of time. But that assumption needs to be backed by empirical evidence, and some studies suggest otherwise. There are several different approaches for a potential vaccine against the coronavirus. The basic idea is that you would get a shot that contains faint versions of the virus. The vaccine would expose your body to a version of the virus that is too weak to cause infection, but just strong enough to stimulate an immune response. Within a few weeks, cells in your immune system would make markers called antibodies, which would be specific for only the coronavirus, or specifically its spike protein. Antibodies then attach to the virus and prevent it from attaching to your cells. Your immune system then responds to signals from the antibodies by consuming and destroying the clumps of viruses. If you then catch the real virus at a later stage, your body would recognize it and destroy it. In other words, your immune system is now primed. Collecting evidence on whether this will be possible, safe, and effective is part of what's taking researchers so long to develop a vaccine. It's a race against time to develop a vaccine amid a pandemic. Each step in.
All right, we will just stop there. So it kind of gives us more information on kind of exactly what the virus is doing to our body, and also exactly how is the virus going to help. So now we're going to move into our question and answer section here. So our first question is from Daphne. She says, and then both participants can reply. Daphne says, I'm a senior with an autoimmune disease, and I'm hesitant about the vaccine. Should it be a concern with her taking it? Anyone would like to answer that?
I can start. So the only contraindication, the only time that we are saying that someone cannot take the vaccine is if you have had an allergic response to vaccines in the past. Not just allergies in general, but an allergic response to vaccines in the past. Having said that, people who are immunocompromised for whatever reason have not been on the CDC's list of people who cannot take the vaccine. What we do say is you should talk to your doctor about the right timing, because you do not want to put your body under any sort of strain. If, for example, you're a cancer patient and you're about to take chemotherapy, your body is at its weakest and is really trying to deal with a lot at the same time. So we would, as we would with any vaccine, recommend you taking it at a time when you're maybe a little bit more stronger. So my answer is that there is no rule that says that people who are immunocompromised cannot take the vaccine, but because each person's individual case is different as to what the autoimmune or immunocompromised disease is and what medications you're taking for it, you should be talking to your doctor about the right timing to take the vaccine.
Okay, all right. And our second question, and feel free to just jump in whenever you want, Dr. Redley and Dr. Leswile. Laura says, knowing so much. Oh, go ahead. Sorry, did you want to say something?
I wanted to add to that because that same question was.
And our second question, and feel free to just jump in whenever you want.
That same question was posed to Dr. Fauci. His response was that they're the ones who really need it because they're immune compromised. But then I saw another report which indicated that because the group of patients that were studied were not those who were immune compromised, they might not necessarily be the ideal candidate. So I do concur with Dr. Davis that the best thing is to consult with your doctor to make that decision.
Okay, all right. And Laura asked, knowing so much about the corona for years, could it be possible that the time would take less in order to develop a vaccine? Or should it take longer period of time as we've seen with like the flu and other vaccines?
You're exactly right. The fact that we've known about the family, the fact that we've been developing the mRNA technique that Dr. Redley so beautifully laid out how that works, means that we were more efficient in developing this vaccine. That does not mean cutting corners. That does not mean that the data was not robust. It means that we built upon the vast knowledge we had about this family, as well as the knowledge that we had started to amass around this technology to create this vaccine. Dr. Redley, anything you'd like to add?
Just to add that, like the flu vaccine, you know, every year you have to get a shot. The reason for that is because of the various different variants, because the vaccine, the virus just mutates so quickly. And so this is one of the challenge that the scientists are faced with. It's changing. Once a vaccine is produced, is it gonna cover the new strains that come out? And so that's one of the factors that has to be considered.
Okay. Jay Buckley asked, why did so many persons have to die and are still dying from coronavirus if we have been preparing for this for so long?
So we have been, when I talked about preparing, we knew research about the family, but in no way were we prepared for this particular virulent strain of SARS-CoV-2. I always tell people that in medicine, we know less than we don't know. That's the challenge of having to keep up with it. As an infectious diseases physician, I have had to deal with many epidemics every 2 years. I was pregnant with my first child around Zika. I was a fellow in my first year when Ebola was here. But SARS-CoV-2, in the way that it made people, in the way that it spread fast, and in how sick it was able to make people, especially the elderly and those who have other pre-existing conditions, was unique in this way. And we haven't seen anything like it since the great flu pandemic. And I would say even now that has been more robust. You know, in the 80s with HIV, we asked the same question: how could this come about? And there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there. But the truth of the matter is viruses are made this way. Right? Most viruses have been in existence for thousands and thousands of, as old as time. And most of them are benign or ones that we can deal with. But every so often, one comes into society that is very dangerous. And SARS-CoV-2 is one of them.
All right. Carol says there have been a couple of deaths in otherwise supposedly healthy and fairly young individuals after being injected with the virus within less than a week. Are we to believe that those are coincidences? And is Guillain-Barré a possible side effect as in the flu vaccine? Mm-hmm.
So this is a topic that I think needs to be addressed. And I'd like to give a few examples. If I'm working in the hospital and someone with cancer comes in and is not feeling well, and I give them a Tylenol and the next day they feel better, I cannot say that the Tylenol has cured cancer. If in a similar way, if someone is given a vaccine and within a specific amount of time, whether that's hours, days, or weeks, they die, you cannot say just from those two things happening and around the same time that the vaccine caused the death. There takes a lot of investigation to make sure that other things didn't happen. People have strokes. People have blood clots that go to their lungs or to their heart or to their brain that can cause people to die suddenly. People have other things going on in their body. Now, we have seen that there have been some side effects from people who have taken this vaccine, most of them mild, and in 1 in 100,000 people, there have been what we would call more severe reactions and no deaths that we have been able to link specifically to the vaccine. But we have seen people, 1 in 100,000, that have had what we would call more moderate or severe reactions and have had to be hospitalized for a short period of time. To give you perspective on that, we see allergic reactions from penicillin, which most people here would take without questioning a doctor, 1 in 1,000 times. So this vaccine is much more safe than even some of the drugs that we take every day without thinking about it. For me, when I think about, in contrast, when I tell people that the question is not the risks and benefits of taking a vaccine versus nothing, it's the risks and benefits of taking a vaccine versus the risks and benefits of getting coronavirus, which includes death. The amount of deaths that are happening in my community, in the patients I personally take care of, where more than one person in the family has been affected or has died, or even in young people who have continued to have symptoms months after they've stopped quarantining. Doctor, I still can't smell. I still can't taste. And we are now seeing some inflammatory conditions around the heart that we don't know what the long-term side effect is. So unfortunately, nothing is 100% in medicine that I know about. There's always going to be some risk or benefit. But when I made the decision as to whether I should take the vaccine, and I did, as has my husband received the vaccine, as he's also a physician, I was weighing the risks and benefits of a vaccine versus the risks and benefits of if I did get coronavirus and what could potentially happen. Dr. Redley?
So that's the reason why they do these clinical trials and the phase 3 in particular.
Watching this thing on Zoom.
Just a reminder, please mute your phones and just please put all questions in the chat. Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Redley.
So the phase 3, thank you, in particular, is one in which they go for numbers. And so large numbers of patients, of individuals will take this drug and see if there are any effects. Not that effects would be at zero, but what they're looking for, low incidence of side effects. And so therefore, with a phase 3 clinical trial in the case of the Pfizer, 38,000, but as you go now into the larger population with, 10 million or 20 million people taking, then we could see incidents showing up which would not have normally been seen earlier. And so it's not a foolproof, and it's always a risk versus the benefit.
Excellent. So you're right. So definitely a risk versus the benefit. Laura mentions that her question is that her sister and niece did have some bad reactions from the vaccine, but it only lasted for 3 days. And she has a history of Bell's palsy and 2 anaphylactic shocks. She was told she would have to take the vaccine in the ER. At some point, will she have to be pressed in order to take the vaccine, or can she refuse?
Vaccine is not mandatory. You have every right to say you do not want to take the vaccine. The only people, and I will say this again, that I would recommend do not take the vaccine or should speak to their doctor before taking it are people who have had severe or anaphylactic allergic responses to other vaccines, not just in general. If you have had anaphylactic shock due to something you ate or another medicine, that does not mean that you have any sort of allergy to anything in the vaccine. However, if you have had any sort of allergic reaction to another vaccine in the past, then you are in the group that has been warned against taking the vaccine. That is the only group of people. Bell's palsy is another one that has come up. This comes up with every single vaccine. People will get Bell's palsy, and there has never been any sort of causal link, any proof to show that this vaccine or any other that I'm aware of cause Bell's palsy exclusively. There have been some incidences where Bell's palsy has been seen in individuals, and those individuals have said, yes, I have had, the vaccine recently, but that does not mean the two are linked. Again, it's about the risks and benefits of this versus coronavirus, because as someone who takes care of people with coronavirus in the hospital, it is not a game. It can be very bad, devastating, and impactful on families and has long-term impact. So for me and my family, the choice was that the vaccine was by and far the better choice for me. I do feel for people who have had reactions, I'm sure it can be scary to the vaccine, but most people have recovered. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about here.
All right. Did you want to add anything, Dr. Redley?
No.
Okay. Monica asked, since there was research on mRNA technology prior to the pandemic, why was a mRNA vaccine not released before the pandemic when the side effects of the vaccine could have been reviewed and documented over time? Is it not possible that some reactions may not show up right away? I do understand the importance of a vaccine, and I do recognize that so many people have lost their lives.
If I may, I think we have touched on the answer to this question to some extent. The checks and balances that are in place, they're rigorous. The FDA, the CDC, the various other entities. So these have to be followed. And so that's the reason why the studies were going on behind the scenes, but nothing to kickstart the urgency, so to speak, until this variant strain that we should not forget is deadly. It's deadly, and now that sort of accelerated the pace of bringing up the vaccine to market.
Okay. So I know Dr. Leswile Davis had mentioned that she and her husband both were vaccinated. The next question was from Sister Verna. Question to all presenters: have you all taken the vaccine, and what was your experience? I too personally can say I've taken the vaccine. I took the Pfizer one, and I did have maybe one day of nausea and just felt tired after the second dose. If you all feel comfortable, would you mind sharing your experience?
So I received the Pfizer vaccine back in December. I had to wait 3 weeks until the second shot. The research shows that you do not receive that 95% effectiveness until you get the second shot. So you cannot just take the first and forego the second. In both instances, it took a couple. At first I felt nothing, I was fine. And then a couple of hours in, I had some arm soreness or tenderness around the site. It felt like my arm was very sore and heavy. That lasted about 8 hours, 12 hours. The next day, by the afternoon, those symptoms had resolved. With the second shot, I would say I felt the same, and maybe a little bit more fatigued for about a day. I will tell you that I have, in excess of 20, maybe 50 colleagues that I now know who have taken the vaccine, that I've, shared experiences as well. Like in the trials, more people, if they were going to have more of the side effects, the most common being headache, muscle ache, even fever or chills with some people, and fatigue. Those tended to occur more commonly after the second shot and did not last more than 2 to 3 days after getting the vaccine. And in fact, it's reassuring because it shows that your immune system is working and ramping up and trying to produce antibodies against the vaccine. So that was my personal experience, just some arm tenderness and maybe a little bit of fatigue after the second shot.
So I would say that our audience is well represented, because one fraction of the audience is represented by Dr. Davis, who was already taken. And now I represent the other fraction, not sure what percentage, who have not yet taken. It's more like, wait and see. So remember now that the vaccine is in short supply. There are not enough dose so that everyone can get as yet. And so it's being prioritized. So I've not reached the age yet, but I'm also in the medical field. So I too could have access if I chose to, but I chose not, at least not yet. I have been taking the flu vaccine though, so that tells you I'm an anti-vaccine. So, but it depends on your situation, your circumstance. What I have been doing though is the preventative, the mask. I was the first one in my my facility to be wearing mask, because I noticed that in other countries where they were dealing with the vaccine, where it actually started, like everybody everywhere was wearing masks. And I quickly said to myself, why are we not wearing masks? So I started wearing my mask. Eventually, over time, more and more persons in my facility, and of course in the country, start wearing masks. The washing of the hands, the boosting of your immune system, that's another important factor. But then again, everything boils down to the risk versus the benefit. Finally, also, I've spoken to several persons who have already taken it, and the report is similar to, as Dr. Davis mentioned, that the first dose, it appears to be okay, but the second dose is when people seem to have more of that reaction, that low fever, that fatigue. If you look at the concentrations of the dose, though, the first dose tends to be lower than the second. And so that could be one of the reasons why the body is producing more effectively the immune response. And so we see these symptoms associated with that.
All right, thank you. And can we talk about what's the chances? So Jay Buckley asked, what is the chances of experiencing an adverse reaction to the vaccine? If I'm symptomatic, can I still get vaccinated?
So far, the data has shown that 1 in 100,000 people have developed a moderate or severe allergy, which is one of the lowest rates I've ever heard of. In those people, they've either had to be monitored for a few hours or in very, very few, be hospitalized for observation and support, and then have done well. There have been no associated deaths to the vaccine at this time. And then what was the second question, Dr. Shelley?
If I'm symptomatic, can I still get vaccinated, or if I have symptoms, maybe?
So the CDC says that you cannot get the vaccine if you currently have coronavirus. You have to wait at least 2 weeks after. So 10 days to 14 days, which is the quarantine period. And you have to be asymptomatic from COVID before you can take the vaccine. They also say, though, if you have had COVID in the past, you can wait up to 3 months. Mm-hmm. So you can take it as early as 2 weeks and not have symptoms, or you can wait up to 3 months before taking it.
Okay. The next question is, why do persons who have recovered from COVID-19 still need to be vaccinated?
It's an excellent question. We do not know at this time if the antibodies that you make from when you get COVID last and for how long. There's no way of knowing that. And this differs from one disease to the next. So as you know, we have to offer a flu vaccine every single year because you do not have immunity in perpetuity. And then there's some shots where you need a booster shot every 5 years, some every 10 years, and some you just need one. We will have to see how long immunity lasts after people take the vaccine, and that will take time. We are still collecting data from the clinical trials, the phase 3 clinical trials, so that we see what happens in the long term. And we will be collecting data from people who are taking the vaccine, and we are doing that right now to see the same. So in time, soon, we'll be able to tell if we need a booster or not. But let me be very clear. This vaccine is a triumph of science. There is no way, given where we were this summer, that I would have thought we would even have an effective vaccine. And this is compared to, in other vaccines like the flu vaccine, you only see 50 to 60% efficacy. So to not only have one, but to have one that's 95% in the case of Moderna and Pfizer is truly a triumph of science.
Mm-hmm. The next question is, we continue year after year to give flu vaccines, and it's said that the vaccine works for that strain that existed the year before. We've developed a vaccine, and now there are 2 new strains. She's referring to the United Kingdom, South Africa, and actually I think there are a couple more. How can we say that the developed drug is or would be effective?
Well, again, it's the same case like with the flu vaccine. The science is that if you take the vaccine, and in most cases, not that you may not get the flu, but if you do, the severity, and it has been shown that the severity and duration is affected. So it does give some amount of protection. no guarantees. Again, it's science. And I think, as someone rightly said, we are at war. We're at war against the virus, which, keep changing. But in some instances, it's been shown that the vaccine is, scientists are working hard to make sure it covers some of these strains, and in some cases that are anticipated. So that's what we're really up against. And so scientists continue to do the best they can to come up with the best responses and solutions, and then we have to do the best we can in terms of doing our part.
Absolutely. And when the strains first came into circulation, so first of all, understand that all viruses mutate. Even coronavirus was mutating as earlier in the summer. The only difference is most of those mutations or new strains are usually very mild and have no significance. They don't do anything bad, they just happen. So the first time we saw strains that could be potentially dangerous was in December in the UK and the South African variants, and now there's others in South America as well. Those strains are shown to cause people to get coronavirus faster, but there's no evidence outside of possibly the South Africa strain that they cause you to be sicker or to die more. On top of that, researchers at Walter Reed, Pfizer, and Moderna were able to look at those strains, and so far, all of the vaccines in circulations work against those strains. You are right in saying that in the case of flu, we have not been able to come up with a vaccine for which every strain is anticipated because of how fast new strains develop in influenza. For coronavirus, so far that has not been the case. Research is ongoing. They keep taking the new strains, going to the lab, looking at them, comparing them to the vaccine. And so far, the vaccines are effective for the strains that are currently in the US. Now, there may be some strains that will not be covered, but that doesn't mean the vaccine will not be effective. If it covers most strains, like I said, influenza only, the vaccine is only 50 to 60% effective, and we are able to stay on top of, for the most part, influenza with that level of efficacy. So to have one that's 90%, even if it goes down to 80%, we would still be in great shape if 70% of people are willing to take this vaccine and we're able to get to herd immunity so that we can start to function closer to normal.
I have a piece of data here, and I just want to share it with you, where this researcher indicated that there are more than 500 coronaviruses that have been identified in bats in China, and there's an estimate of some 5,000 in the future. So I've even heard people say the possibility of pandemic in another phase, a second phase of pandemic, based on these other virus. So it's a challenge. It really is.
All right. Viscus and Loretta writes, in addition to my allergy reaction, I have concern on the ingredients of the vaccine. Do we know the actual content of the vaccine, especially the mRNA fats? Knowing the ingredients would probably help me to have more comfort in taking the vaccine.
So I will take that one because I think I did mention briefly some of the composition. So for the Pfizer vaccine, in both of them, we're looking at segment of the mRNA, what we call it polynucleotide. That's a string of, it's a genetic material. The mRNA, as some of us are aware. And so what they did was to take a segment of that and inject it in the cells for both the Pfizer and Moderna and the others. I think they're working on another, I think it must be the AstraZeneca, where you have a single dose instead of a double dose. So in addition to the actual viral material to stimulate the production for the antibodies, there's also some lipids that helps the virus with penetrating the the cells. There's also sucrose and salts. The Pfizer boasts that there's no preservative, and so it's purely benign ingredients beside the active ingredient itself. The concern that some people have about the preservative, like that is in the case of the flu vaccine. We know some people who are allergic to egg should not take it because the egg protein wasn't used in its preparation. But we don't have that. We don't see that in the case of the coronavirus vaccines. And there's no and there's another ingredient which is made of a mercury derivative that is not in it. So persons who are concerned about mercury and its effect and the effect it causes, that translates to what flu vaccine may cause. We don't have that concern in the case of the coronaviruses vaccines.
All right, thank you. Now, I think you touched on this question before about whether the vaccine should be considered or not considered while receiving chemo. I think your answer was you need to check with your doctor first. And that was from Rochelle. So the next question is from Lavi Reed. How important do you think vitamin D, zinc, selenium, and vitamin C is in fighting against COVID?
So all these vitamins you mentioned, they are critical in boosting the immune system. Mm-hmm. So the vaccine is really geared to help the body's immune system fight. So if you have a strong, robust immune system, then it helps. It doesn't hurt. And so things like your vitamin C, your vitamin D, these are critical vitamins which helps in the construction of these fighter cells of the body, the white blood cells, the B lymphocytes and the T lymphocytes. These fighting mechanisms of the cells are only revved up more when you take these various vitamins, and so this is critically important. The zinc is another very important ingredient that is important, and you're encouraged to take that too.
Okay, all right. And have you, Lavi also raised, have you, any of you treated COVID patients? What was the treatment? I definitely have treated COVID patients. I think it depends on whether they're inpatient or outpatient. I guess, Dr. Letzweiler, I'll have you take the inpatient because I think that's where you see them as well. But outpatient, it definitely depends on the person. So usually we try to treat conservatively, we do the vitamins, having them make sure they increase the vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. I also recommend people to monitor their oxygen level because I want to make sure their oxygen level is above 94%. We now just recently this past month have access to the outpatient monoclonal antibodies, which basically helps. It's an infusion that a person takes just one time where it helps actually or marks the COVID virus in the body so that the body can come and actually just kind of kill the virus itself. So it kind of marks them. And what we found with the outpatient monoclonal antibodies is that it has helped reduce people's risk for hospitalizations. You may remember that this was what the President of the United States was given when he had COVID-19. So now COVID-19. So this is now something that we can now give to our patients in the outpatient. Also, we just treat conservatively if people are having body aches or fevers. We alternate between Tylenol and Advil and sleep, rest, things of that nature. So I'll let you take the inpatient, what you all do there. Mm-hmm.
So for people who are hospitalized, the only available treatment that we know is effective is steroids. Have been shown to help those who have an oxygen requirement, meaning they need oxygen to help them breathe. If they're in the hospital, in a hospital bed, but do not require additional oxygen, they do not need any treatments outside of general support for other symptoms they may be having. So steroids have been shown to decrease the need for someone to go from being moderately sick to severely sick and death. Other treatments such as remdesivir are also ones that we may use if people are having a high inflammatory reaction to the coronavirus, but studies have not shown that they are equivocally beneficial in these patient populations. Unfortunately, there are no other treatments at this time that have been shown to help with coronavirus in a significant way, and certainly we do not yet have a cure.
Thank you. The next question is, can we talk about blood clots that we've been hearing on the news with people who have gotten COVID? The one thing I'll say is that with blood clots, the one with the COVID disease, one of the complications is that people can have an increased risk of thromboembolisms is the actual medical terminology, but they're basically blood clots. So people who've been very healthy, no history, will get COVID, and sometimes they can develop a blood clot in the leg called the DVT, or they can develop a blood clot in the lungs, which can be called a pulmonary embolism. And so that's something we've been seeing. It's just one of the complications of having the disease. Mm-hmm. All righty. And what Yolanda asked, what about someone with sickle cell or sickle cell trait? Would we be able to take the COVID shot even if they've never had the flu shot?
Absolutely. What you not ever taking a shot in your life, regardless of what it is, flu or anything else, does not preclude you from getting the shot. You can absolutely take it. There's no disease that you can have that can prevent you from taking the shot. The only thing I would say is if you are immunocompromised or autoimmune, you definitely should speak to your doctor about the right time. But people with sickle cell and any other condition can take the vaccine.
Okay. Are there any other vitamins that you would recommend to strengthen your immune system? We've mentioned vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. Any other vitamins that you recommend?
I think that vitamins in general, I think Dr. Redley already addressed this, are helpful in general, not just specifically to coronavirus, in helping to boost your immune system, make sure you're healthy, have everything you need to have a strong immune system. But there's no studies at this time to show that any one vitamin is beneficial for coronavirus.
Paula also writes, why isn't there an outcry for those groups that are not adversely affected by the virus having more access to the vaccines? So let me repeat that. Why isn't there an outcry for those groups that are not adversely affected by the virus having more access to the vaccines? I think she's referring to the disparities that we're seeing among African-American communities among our specifically in Miami, where the area where you have more wealth has had a higher rate of vaccine administration than those that are of lower economic status as well. Mm-hmm.
This is my area of engagement, and my passion is that whilst vaccine hesitancy or people having mistrust around taking the vaccine is of great concern, there are many in our community who want this vaccine and will have limited or no access. This goes back to the issues I spoke around systemic and institutional racism and around these issues that have been longstanding within our country. Right now, the difficulty when the vaccine was first rolled out before the current administration came into power is that the federal government said that this was a state-by-state led process, meaning leaving states to figure out how to do this. On top of that, very few vaccines went out in the first wave, and so they had to make determinations about which regions got them and how. In my mind, the lack of transparency around equity of the virus rollout makes people unsure that it is fair and it is happening in a good way, which is what a lot of us are calling for. The Biden-Harris administration has called for racial equity as one of the 4 cornerstones of their administration. They've put a Dr. Nunes-Smith in charge of this as it relates to COVID. They have purchased 200 million vaccines and have said that they will be working closely with states to make sure this is a more transparent and equitable process. We have yet to see that, and it is an area of concern, which is why we all should be advocating and we all should be speaking up in our small areas of influence.
Next is, I was told that blood clots form as a cause from COVID and travel to the lungs, other areas as well. So in actuality, the COVID was either the culprit. What is your view? So definitely with COVID, it actually causes your body to be, to have, I guess you could say, more sticky, where you can have a blood clot of, it actually predisposes you to more blood clots. So COVID actually does expose you to more blood clots, or predispose you to more blood clots. Peaches writes, are keloids considered an allergic reaction to this vaccine? What are some allergic reactions to look out for? So you want to answer that, Doctor? I can answer that. So keloids would not be considered an allergic reaction. A keloid is a reaction of the skin when you're cut, or when you're maybe have like a shot. Sometimes people, instead of their body, when their body actually kind of heals, it heals with a scar. And for some people, they're just at risk for more keloids. So some of the common risk factors or side effect reactions to the vaccine are going to be your headaches, your fever, chills, nausea, fatigue, having swollen lymph nodes. These are all signs that your body is actually responding to the virus, because your body is like the video was showing, is making that antibody towards it. And so that's why you're having it. And usually for most people, they may have these symptoms for a couple days. I think one person mentioned her family had it for 3 days, but then it actually goes away as your body. But this is just a sign that your body's responding properly to the vaccine. Any comment on that one? Any other comments on that one?
Dr. Shelley, not on that one. I just wanted to take us back to the question on vitamins. Because this idea of building your immune system is so critical. It's not just the vitamins. It's like a whole lifestyle change, of fresh air, importance of adequate hydration through water, fruits and vegetables, activity. And especially with this pandemic, and we are limited in, going out, moving around, we're gonna have to get creative in making sure that we increase our activity, rest, getting adequate rest, and managing stress. These are all factors which do affect our bodies, our immune system, and in order to make sure that our immune system is in tip-top shape, we want to address some of these concerns and making sure we're doing them to help our bodies.
Thank you for that. Now, Ms. Lavie Reed asked, why do you think it took the medical profession so long to realize that those ventilators were killing people, or to realize that it wasn't working when people were dying with it? I do want to address that ventilators don't kill people. They actually help them breathe. In the video, it kind of showed how the coronavirus actually causes you to have pneumonia. What we've noticed with the COVID virus is that you're having pneumonia in both lungs. The pneumonia is not just a regular community-acquired pneumonia where you may have it in one lobe, but you're having it in both lungs, and it's severe enough where you cannot breathe on your own. And you would die if you did not have the ventilator to help actually putting that air back into the lungs. So just to be clear, ventilators do not kill people. They actually help you breathe. Any other comments on that one? All right. The next question is, how possible is it for a 75-year-old man with a whole lot of pre-existing conditions who was tested positive for COVID have no symptoms whatsoever?
Well, he has been, if I may jump on that one, it's very specific, so it's hard to give this a specific answer, but it could be that he's been taking his regular fresh air. He's been taking his water, he's in just good health. He takes his adequate supply of fruits and vegetables. providing him with this vitamins and antioxidants, etc., etc. Probably he's taking his proper rest. You know, our bodies are made as follows a cyclical pattern of rest, 7 days a week, you know, one time out of the month, or night and day, circadian rhythm. So he probably might be following all of that and is in tip-top shape.
And the other thing I would also say is that with the COVID virus, there's no telling what your reaction will be. Even though he's 75, he has pre-existing conditions, you know, his body may be able to fight that virus better than someone who's in their 30s who has no pre-existing conditions. What we found that there's no rhyme or reason on why some people have more side effects or more complications than another. And that's why our push is for prevention with not only isolation, not social isolation, kind of making social distancing, making sure you're staying 6 feet, make sure you're washing your hands, make sure you're wearing your mask, because we don't know how your body's going to respond, unfortunately. So I do want to take a moment. Dr. Latsuayo Davis will have to leave soon. We just want to say thank you so much for your timely information. I want to thank you for just coming. And I know you'll have to pop off soon. So I just want to say thank you publicly. Yolanda asked, she's hearing that the vaccine may be mandatory in some workplaces. Specifically, somebody also mentioned in Delta. Now, it won't necessarily be mandatory for the government per se, but just like in certain institutions like the hospital, they want everyone to get their flu shot. There's always ways around it. So for those people that can't get it, they're able to at least get a note from their doctor, or for some people where it's a religious issue, they get a note from their pastor or their priest or their imam. So there's ways around it if you do not necessarily want to get the virus. You just have to see whatever the protocols are. All right, next question. Hyacinth writes, in the same way, if someone is tested COVID positive and dies within 28 days for any reason, this should not always be blamed on COVID. I guess the question is, how do we know, is it COVID that's killing people or if it's something else? Mm-hmm.
There is a lot of rigorous processes that go towards being able to rule out other processes that includes an autopsy and other very specific medical criteria that go into being able to ascertain the cause of death for any condition. So you're absolutely right. I know there's a lot of conspiracy theories around the fact that we don't know how to link cause of death, but you could say that about anything. You could say, how do we know for sure the heart attack did it? How do we know for sure the lung clot did it? We do a lot of very rigorous science to be able to say, not just that it was likely caused by coronavirus, but to rule out all other main causes. And these tests and these autopsies take days to become conclusive. And if we don't find a conclusive reason, if we cannot say equivocally that it was coronavirus, we do say that in the cause of death. We don't just assign it to coronavirus because it was one of the many tests. Most people, if you test their blood, test them, there's multiple things going on at the same time. So since the beginning of medicine, and for as long as we've had these sort of tools, we have had to make these determinations with a lot of scientific rigor.
Thank you. One last question here. Would you recommend that everyone who had COVID take aspirin 81 milligrams daily due to a potential for blood clots?
That's an excellent question. That's not a formal recommendation at this time, but I think some physicians are taking into account other reasons that we know aspirin should be taken. We haven't seen as causal of a link with the blood clots requiring aspirin at this time. So this is not a recommendation that has been formally introduced.
Mm-hmm.
If I may just quickly support that response, that speaks to the rigor of our system. We don't just make a recommendation unless it's scientifically proven, unless it's science, evidence-based. And it's out of these type of rigor that recommendations come. And so we can have some faith in our health system.
All right. So Financial Brokers writes, no lab in the world has isolated the virus. How then can a vaccine be made for that non-existent virus? So actually it has been isolated. In fact, it was isolated rather quickly. The Chinese had actually, their scientists had actually put out the DNA sequence of the actual virus, which was how we were able to create the actual vaccine that we have today. Next, Ann Fraser Hines says, why are Blacks always the people who die and are terribly sick with these diseases? Are we genetically made up in a matter where with every disease of these types that affect and kill us, were we created differently?
So there are some diseases that have a genetic basis. For example, there are diseases that are more common in people of Jewish descent, more common in people of Caucasian descent, more common in people of Mediterranean descent, and more common in people of African or African American descent. So those diseases do exist. Coronavirus is not one of those diseases. The reason behind the fact that Black and brown people are disproportionately affected are some of the reasons that I brought up earlier. Number one, we see, unfortunately, more burden of the heart disease and the lung disease, diabetes and kidney disease that makes people who get coronavirus more likely to get very sick and die. Unfortunately, we see a lot of that in our community. But the underlying reason we see all of those more so in our community is because of the social determinants of health, things that make us less likely to be able to access healthcare in the way that other people are able to. The fact that we can't always access doctor's visits, we aren't always able to get insurance, we aren't always able to have a car to get to our doctor's visits, we aren't always able to prioritize our finances towards medications and towards doctor's visits. We have a great mistrust for a lot of medical institutions because of how badly we've been treated in the past. So that systemic and institutional racism has created an inequitable health structure for Black and brown communities, which is the basis of what needs to be addressed. We do not get the same treatment as people of other races, specifically white races in this country. This is known, this is documented, and it needs to be addressed, which is why the Biden and Harris administration has made racial equity one of the 4 cornerstones of their administration, and have also put someone in charge of looking specifically at health equity so that the care of brown and Black people can be prioritized in this way. Unfortunately, those inequities in treatment go far back. And so I believe it'll take a lot of time, funding, policy, and real change to see it, which I do not think we've seen thus far. I'm so sorry that I have to go. I have 2 little kiddos that I got childcare for until this time. It is such an honor and a privilege to be able to spend this time with you. The detailed nature in which you ask questions shows how much you care, not only about yourselves, but our community. Don't stop holding us accountable, but please do make this decision for what's best for you and your family, not because of your distrust of someone else. I will not let the entities that have taken so much from us prevent me from keeping me, my family, and my patients safe. And I really encourage you to do the same. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
And a lot of people
we'll
are looking for ways to connect with me. I'm sorry, I've been getting quite a few messages, but I can't respond to them all. I apologize. I can be found on Twitter, on Facebook, and on Instagram, depending on what your social media concerns are. And I do a lot of education through media and through my posts there. So please find me, follow me. I think you are in great hands for the remainder of this with Dr. Shelley, my good friend, and Dr. Redley, my former Cleveland mate. So it's a pleasure to have spent this time with you. Thank you all.
Nice meeting you.
Thank you so very much. So so unfortunately we will need to end around 6:45, but we have 15 more minutes. I appreciate your questions. As you see, we're trying to get through the list. Ann Fraser asked, why 2 shots instead of 1 as far as for the vaccine, specifically for the Moderna and the Pfizer?
So now I can't defer to Dr. Davis, right?
I know. It's me and you, Dr. Redley.
But I did face this question before, and the study was designed that way. So the 2 major studies, the Moderna and the Pfizer, are designed so that you got the first dose, which is usually a low dose. They want to see how the body, I would imagine, respond. And then the second is a higher dose to see how the body responds. It's like a priming and then. So because this is how the study was designed, then if you're going to get